Hey, it's Jen. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here today. You're in for something really special. Our guest is Jesse J. Anderson, the author of the best selling book, Extra Focus, The Quick Start Guide to Adult ADHD. And y'all, he's kind of a big deal. He just spoke at South by Southwest and is a rising voice in the ADHD world. So, yeah, I'm super pumped he's here. And a little extra honored he's joining our growing podcast community. In this episode, Jesse and I get real about what ADHD actually is beyond the hyper kid stereotype and how that outdated view has left so many of us undiagnosed for way too long. We talk about how ADHD shows up at work, in our marriages or relationships, in our internal dialogue. And Jesse shares vulnerable, practical strategies that will leave you feeling both seen and inspired. Whether you've just been diagnosed, are parenting someone with ADHD, or have been navigating this for years, this conversation is packed with insights and compassion that you won't want to miss. So grab your tea, put on your noise canceling headphones, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today is an exciting day. I am super pumped. We have Jesse J. Anderson, the author of Extra Focus, The Quick Start Guide to Adult ADHD with us today. And he's like a super big deal. He just presented at South by Southwest. So this is such an honor to have him on our show that's growing, but still kind of small. So welcome, Jesse. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if I'm a big deal, but I appreciate your really kind intro. So yeah, my name's Jesse J. Anderson. I wrote that book, Extra Focus, and I first got diagnosed, what is it, 8 years ago now, something like that. So when I was in my mid 30s, and then I just quickly tried to devour. It was like such a light bulb moment that took over my life that it was like I quickly tried to devour and learn everything I could, which back then there wasn't much. It was really hard to find the best sorts of information I found at the time was a book that was written in the 90s, I think.
Oh,
And so
dear.
it was bad.
And we knew nothing about ADHD in the 90s.
Oh, yeah, it was not great. It was still a revelation to me because I thought I knew what ADHD was. And then when I
Yeah.
found out what it really was, it was like, oh, any sort of information is going to be really helpful to me. But that's ultimately why I wrote the book, because I wanted to write the book that I wish I had gotten on day one when I had first gotten diagnosed.
Oh.
Just give me the practical guide of what is this? How does it affect my life? And what the heck can I do about it?
I love that. And what did you think ADHD was? And then what did you learn it was?
Yeah, so I think growing up in the 80s and 90s, I knew what ADHD was. Like I say in the book, like ADHD kind of has a PR problem because most people have heard of it, but we have this totally different idea of what it is. And so when I was growing up, I thought ADHD was that kid, that the boy usually that ran in circles in class and was always getting in trouble. And I did get in a fair amount of trouble like in elementary school, but I never felt like the hyper kid. And I also didn't have I think I thought that people with ADHD couldn't focus at all.
Mm.
And I knew that wasn't true for me because I could focus really intently on the things that were interesting to me.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, like now I know that that's hyperfocus and really common with ADHD. But at the time, I thought that meant I can't have ADHD because I have this hyperfocus for those things that are interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that really matches what society thought and why a lot of girls are missed, actually. It's something we
Totally.
talk about on the show a lot is how a lot of women, especially once they hit perimenopause, all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, I'm ADHD. I never knew it because with the drop in estrogen, that impacts dopamine even more. So
Mhm.
there's even an increased drop in access to dopamine. And so it's just, that's when women are finding out. And what you're saying is exactly why so many girls got missed because we didn't look like the hyperactive boy, but it's interesting to hear that as a man, as a once in your life boy,
Mm.
missed too.
Yeah, I just didn't have I mean, I kinda look back knowing what I know now, it just seems so obvious that I had ADHD, and it was, like, wild reading about it for the first time and just thinking, like, "How did nobody say anything ever?" I never had an inkling that this could have been me, and maybe some of those conversations were had and I just didn't know about it, but as far as I understood, never once came up, and I think it's because I didn't have that really obvious hyperactivity. I wasn't like climbing all over things. I wasn't running in circles and all that sort of stuff. And so even though now I definitely have some of the like if you look at the I forget the name, the different types
Uh,
presentation.
yeah, the different presentations like
Yeah,
combined
so
or yeah, hyperactive or inattentive. Yeah.
yeah, so I definitely have combined. I check all the boxes on both sides. And so I definitely have that hyperactive. It just didn't show up in the way that I think people were looking for it back then. And so that was never just like a thing that I ever heard. And it was very shocking to look through that list later and be like, even the medical, like, this isn't just like hearing from other people where it sounds similar. Like looking at the medical, like diagnostic criteria, this is 100%. I'm checking every single box except maybe one, and so it just was pretty wild that it never ever came up growing up.
Yeah, that would be wild. Were your parents shocked?
They I don't know if they would say shocked. I the way I talked with it to them was kind of weird, I think, because when I first got diagnosed and then I was learning all about it, I had that thing where I basically felt like, "Oh, now I know what this is, and now I can see it everywhere, and I wanna tell everybody that I think that they have this thing." And it turns out that most people, my parents included, don't wanna hear that they have a medical condition that they've never really looked into before. And so I'm a little bit more tactful now, but I think I'm pretty sure both my parents have ADHD. Very different versions or presentations of it, but I
Yeah.
think they both have it, and they both think that they do not. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's similar to me. Although I think my dad is finally accepting it. My mom's deceased, so I never had this conversation with her, but I look back and I'm like, "Hmm."
Right.
Right? So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah. I think my parents may have sort of, without ever saying it out loud, I think they may have sort of accepted it by this point because it's pretty obvious. And they both have lots of like they have other family members on both sides
yeah.
that definitely have that were diagnosed with ADHD. And so, yeah, I think it's settled in now, but they just don't want to say. Part of it's a generational thing too. They don't really talk
Correct.
about that kind of stuff. So,
Correct. Are they boomers?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, there are a lot especially for men, boomers. Like, well, if you
Right.
think about even when I was growing up, to have anything to do with your brain that wasn't quote unquote normal, like, that meant you needed to be in a state hospital on crazy medications. I shouldn't use the word crazy, but intense medications that
Right,
were for
right.
people who were psychotic. And so I remember growing up in the 80s and there were like a few housewives who were quote unquote hysterical and had to go on Valium. But it was like
Oh,
we didn't
man.
talk about those crazies. I mean, like that was I'm not saying that now, but that's how it was looked upon. So then when we think about our folks who are both in the same generation, even though we're apart in age, but that was just so weird for them to even consider admitting their brain had something different.
Yeah, and I feel like when I grew up, it was kinda that way too, and it really started to change, I don't know, probably when I was in my 20s, maybe 30s, like, right around then is when people started to be like, "Oh, you could tell other people that you go to therapy, and it's not like
Yeah.
this black mark against you or something like that. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a great to seek out advice and help or whatever it is. It's not, yeah, this really negative stigma that used to be." And I definitely remember that when I was growing up. It felt, oh, you don't want to talk about that. And you don't want to admit. I think that's what it really, you don't want to admit
Yeah.
because then people will know and they'll think this thing about you. And it became kind of this whole thing.
This whole thing. P.S. I just need to say, on behalf of all of my fellow cis het white women or women in general, I should say, not even white, it doesn't matter. Um, Tell men to go to therapy. That is, I'm like, oh my gosh, every woman who is listening to this is he married? He's married, ladies. Seriously, bro.
Yeah, I mean, therapy definitely, speaking of like therapy, totally saved my marriage because
Yeah.
I wasn't going to therapy before, and then I found out about ADHD,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I was like, "Oh, I should really figure this out." And then it turns out if you're married with undiagnosed ADHD for 10 or so years, there's a lot of stuff that's kinda going on that you gotta maybe figure out. And so
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
for my first year, that therapy was basically me learning about ADHD and then us trying to fix the marriage that has gone through 10 years of ADHD. So it was like we literally every other week my wife would come with me. And so it was like marriage counseling slash ADHD coaching or whatever. So yeah.
You know, I love about that. I love you sharing that, Jesse, because then what the guys get to hear, because I do have some men who listen to my podcast who are like, why don't you help us? And I'm just like, because I know women better and it's just whatever. But it's good for them to hear that, like, women don't see them as weak or bad, that actually it ends up like being this partnership. And you
Mhm.
actually probably, I assume, made you and your wife be closer than you ever were as you did your healing work and then you healed together. And so it's just really beautiful for you to share that. I know we didn't plan on talking about that, but like I love that you're sharing that because a lot of the spouses of my therapy clients in my other business are just like they like can't go to therapy. They don't want to be seen as something wrong with them or weak. And they're afraid that it will negatively impact the marriage if they go. But it's the opposite. So I think it's cool that you're
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, it is weird because, like I said, like there's a lot of history of that kind of toxic masculinity, which is like hard to get away from that. And there
Correct.
even is some stigma. I think I'm so open book with so much of this now that it wouldn't be, but like maybe 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have told my bros that I'm going to therapy
Yeah.
because there is just that stigma still exists. Now, like everyone knows, I'm kind of an open book, and so I'm not hiding it anymore, but I get that there is sort of like for a whole plethora of reasons, but there's sort of that stigma that's a little bit difficult to get over. I do
Yeah.
think I think it was helpful for me that it wasn't just marriage counseling or whatever, but I was also getting the one-on-one time with the
Yeah.
therapist.
Yeah.
That really helped a lot because then I felt like I could be open without feeling in a marriage, you kind of feel like you're like trying to protect some of your cards in the situation. I don't know, you're like trying to navigate it in a certain way. And so having the time where I could just be completely open and not feel like that I'm going to be judged in a certain way as my wife and I are trying to, figure out how to steer things in the right direction.
Right.
I think that really helped me for that situation, kind of
Yeah.
having both where that every other
That
week
makes
thing
sense.
really worked really well for
That
us.
makes sense. Plus, like when couples are in a situation, whether you're married or not, if you're listening to this, when you're in a situation where one is really pissed at the other for something that the other isn't addressing, having the spouse who's mad be there while you're vulnerably sharing all the things you need help with is not the best because they're pissed. So they're not in their best self either to have compassion
Right.
for the parts of you that are struggling. And instead, they're like, well, why don't you just and that's usually their feelings are valid, right? It's valid to be frustrated and even angry and whatever, but it's just not terribly effective or useful to bring that in on the one-on-one work. So I love that.
Totally,
I
totally. Yeah, I think that's really what it was. It's not yeah, it's not that anything's invalid, it's that it's not maybe useful in that moment of trying to work on certain things
correct.
or getting in the right frame of mind or whatever it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I found that super super helpful
Yeah.
having those kind of divided sessions.
Yeah, cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. It's such a journey. So I do want to get to, I mean, y'all, Jesse wrote this awesome book. Like what? It came out in 2023. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, yep. About a
And
year and a half ago.
and like he said, it's the book that he needed that didn't exist at the time, and it's fantastic. PS, it is the fastest read. I read it in about 2.5 days, and you all know I work more than full time when it first came out, and then last night, I literally read the whole book in an hour, well, most of it, because I was like, "Oh, I should probably read this because I've got ADHD," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, Jesse's on my podcast tomorrow." So I click, it's that fast of a read, and there's so many good strategies. But I want to do a different angle today because if you've been following, I'm really broadening this to not just be about ADHD women entrepreneurs, but also ADHD people in careers too. And so I've asked Jesse if he would share a little bit about all this. He's got all these strategies. He's not going to go through all of them. Buy his book, Extra Focus. But but I've asked him to go over some of the ones and how you can use them in the workplace because Jesse has been a software analyst for a long time and and has navigated that more recently than I have because I've been self-employed for 11 years now. So I've asked him, so Jesse, I know there's a million skills you share. When you think about your work life, are there any that stand out that you like absolutely relied on most of the time?
Yeah, so I'll say, well, first I'll talk about a not so great situation I had at work, and then
Uh-huh.
some of the ways I changed it from then. So
Yeah.
before I knew I had ADHD, I was working at this one job, and it was the kind of job where I had a lot of little responsibilities underneath me. A lot of things that a lot of details that I had to get everything right. And every once in a while, like I might forget one. And when you have ADHD, like out of sight, out of mind. So if I forget to do that one week, I might never remember to do it again if something doesn't remind me that that is a thing. And so I was working at this job and I had all these things I was doing, but I thought I was doing amazing. It really felt like I every conversation I had with my manager was like, Everything's great. Love all this stuff you're doing." Long story short, one day I get the dreaded, "Hey, Jesse, we need to have a talk. Come meet me in my office," which is like the worst thing in the world. Just like,
RSD?
yeah, RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, goes just crazy in that moment, goes super intense. And I'm like, "Oh no, what is going to happen?" And so I walk in, sit down, and my manager shows me a list of he basically for the last year and a half had written down every single little thing that I'd gotten wrong and never told me about any of it. And so I
Okay.
never had a chance to fix any of it. It was just, here's a list of everything you've messed up for the last year and a half.
Now, okay, here's the thing. Yes. Okay, first of all, ADHD admin tasks hard. Of course you forgot them. Part two, F minus to the supervisor, because when you're supervising anybody, ADHD or not, those conversations need to happen as things happen.
Totally,
That isn't
100%.
on you. I mean, that's a raw deal, dude.
I totally agree because that's what it was super frustrating, and it was kind of a mix where on one hand I was embarrassed of, oh my gosh, I forgot these things and I had no idea, but I was
Right.
also like really annoyed of like why did I think everything was amazing for the last year and a half? Like, what? You never said anything, you never brought up any issues so that I could try to correct it. It was super frustrating. And obviously, and I didn't know about ADHD at the time. And so I had no idea why am I forgetting these things? They seem so simple. I did it perfectly fine for 7 months. And then I just forgot one day and never did it again. So that was like not a great experience. And one of the things I did a few years later, I had a different manager and then I found out about having ADHD. And so I had a conversation with my manager and I basically said, "Hey, I think I told him the actual story. Hey, this happened at a previous job. I never ever want to have that conversation again of finding out that the last year and a half have been bad and I didn't know about it. And so can we just get like every like once a week have just a real quick, hey, thumbs up, everything's good, or hey, you forgot this thing this week, just so that I can be a better employee for you. Like I don't want you to have to think about these things, but if you see something, like tell me so that I can fix it and we can be on the same page." And that's something I've done ever since then. Whenever I have a different manager, I need that weekly thumbs up. We're both cool and we're on the same page. And I don't have to, not only does that give them the easy opportunity to tell me stuff because I'm directly asking, like, hey, I want to know this feedback right away. But it also helps me to not live in fear, which is what I was doing. Of, am I actually doing a good job, or is he keep secretly keeping this negative list about me that I don't know about? And so that's one thing that's been really huge, having that like weekly check-in.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Because even I remember when I had a job as an actuary, especially in my former career, I was an actuarial analyst for 4 years. I can't call myself a full fledged actuary because I only passed 4 exams, but still, um, I still claim it because those exams were awfully hard. I'll just say it that way. I've got stronger words. But anyway, but I remember having a lot of tasks like that and always wondering if I was doing a good job and never knowing. I had a lot of systems set up because I went to a small Catholic
Right.
school. So I had a lot of one-on-one attention and they taught me these systems. So I was almost like obsessively obsessive and compulsive about my systems by then because I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew I needed them. But I
Right.
For all I know, I'm still friends with my old supervisor from what, 30 years ago on LinkedIn. For all I know, she's still got a list. Like,
Right.
so it's just what a brilliant idea, both because that regulates your own nervous system. Because we know when our nervous systems are dysregulated, we can't focus. It exacerbates ADHD because when your nervous system is dysregulated, you're in your fight or flight. I'm sure you know this. When you're in your fight or flight response or shutdown response or freeze or fun or whatever, your only focus is survival. So by
Right.
doing that meeting, that was brilliant because you took yourself out of that constant like frenetic fight or flight energy of, oh my God, am I doing a good job? Did I forget something? Into I'm going to ground in with my supervisor and we're just going to do a little check in and see how it is so that you were more regulated. That's one of the hacks that no one talks about, but that is freaking brilliant. I like
It's
that.
such a simple thing,
Yeah.
and, like, most managers are gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, sure, not even a big deal, like, a quick check-in, yeah, that's no problem." But like you're saying, it has all these really huge actual ramifications of it. And especially, I think probably a lot of people with ADHD can relate with this. I, for so many of the jobs I've had, have always felt like I'm behind because my energy is such like a roller coaster compared to most people. And so I'll have a 5 hour sprint where I'll do 40 hours of worth of work in this 4 hours. I'm just
Correct.
like really in it for the moment. But then I'll have 2 days that go by and I'm like, "Did I do anything?" I feel like I didn't do anything. And what happens is, like, because I have that 4-hour sprint, I, like, lock that into my brain of that should be my normal. And so
Oh,
then I'm
right.
always feeling
Yeah.
like I'm behind, like I'm doing a bad job anytime I'm not in that, like, really intense, like, flow state.
Right.
And so because of that, I, especially in early jobs, always feel like I'm behind, and so I'm, like, working late, working extra hours because I feel like I'm failing all the time,
Yeah.
and I'm just, like, trying to catch up, and so there's all this overwork that happens, and it's stressful because I'm doing all this extra work, which is, adding to the stress, but then I still feel like it doesn't feel like I'm ever caught up, it still feels like I'm behind, and so it's this giant mess that all of that really gets resolved by having just this quickly weekly check-in with my manager
Yeah.
where we are both on the same page, and I know that they're happy with the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. Well, also what I hear in that too is this idea that because we can a lot of us can have these hardcore hyper focused stints. Not everyone can direct their hyper focus, but some of us have learned how to. And where we can be super productive that we think that that's always our ability to focus and that is just not true. Our focus is going to vary and what I hear you saying and this is true for me too and I don't know anyone listening, but like when I'm in one of those states, I get more done than someone else would in 2 or 3 days.
Totally, 100%.
So, yes, I don't spend all of my time in one of those, but I don't need to because we don't have to outperform everyone else. We just need to do our piece.
Exactly, yeah, which is it's so hard. I think part of it too is well, one, our, like, difficulty with understanding time, and so we're
Oh,
not
yeah.
aware for so long, I wasn't aware that was happening. I just felt like sometimes I'm doing really good and sometimes I'm not, and it just feels like all I can ever remember is the not, and so I just feel, we have that success amnesia where, like, I'm forgetting anything I've ever done well, like, all of that is out the window, and so it just always feels like I'm behind and that I've never done anything this difficult before, and I'm probably gonna fail, and then I'm remembering all the failures I had in school, and that becomes top of mind. It becomes this really it's so easy to get in that, like, negative cycle of negative state,
Yeah.
and so I find, yeah, like, this meeting and other things like that of trying to remind myself of, "Hey, you've done some things well. You are good at this kinda work. You've had this success." Like, I keep one of the things I talk about in the book is, like, keeping a smile file, which is like actually something to remind yourself of those things you do well. Because, like I said, with the success amnesia, that is so important to be able to remember that stuff to
Yep.
continue to do well in the future. And
Yep.
so whenever people like leave me like positive feedback on things, or someone says, "Hey, great job on this," or you were like saying really nice stuff about me being on the Southwest by Southwest panel, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. That's kind of a big deal. I should
It's a
write
huge
that down."
deal.
So yeah, that's something I should put that in my smile file, something to remind that I can check all the time to remind myself of things I've done well, because it's so easy for that stuff to just fade. And me, because I'm so focused in the present, again, it's that time thing, like
Yep.
future time and past time are so feel like I can't even really perceive those ideas.
Uh-huh.
I'm so focused in the present that it makes it really difficult to remember the past and to plan for the future. So it's kind of this like whole whirlwind going
Yeah,
on there.
totally. So I have a kudos file, which I actually did not realize was helping my ADHD till I read your book. But I've had a kudos file for a long time since I became a therapist because when you're first starting out as a therapist, you're not terribly good at it, but you're also not good at having thick skin yet. And so people
Mm,
say stuff to you that makes you feel like total crap.
huh,
And when people are doing well, they just stop coming. They don't come in and say,
mm,
"I'm doing really well." I mean, some will because you have a relationship and they'll come in and say, "I think I'm good," but usually people just disappear when they're doing better. So whenever I get any as a therapist, especially my early years, but even now, when I get any kind of positive feedback, an email, a note, that goes into my kudos file. And then I read that shit whenever I feel bad about myself. And now I've got like 30 years worth. So that's awesome. But the other thing I do is I have a daily wins journal and I do it
mm,
daily-ish, right?
yeah.
And in some ways, this was an opportunity just for me to buy another journal, let's be truthful, um, 'cause 'cause that's my thing. But I write down every
I think that's all of our thing. I think just about everyone with ADHD is like, "Oh, another journal?
and then
Yes. In fact, I'm gonna have the perfect system this time. It's gonna be amazing. I love it. Give me another journal."
that's one of the things that I like that you mentioned in your book. That one helped me because actually that was one of the things I took from you that really helped me that I share out with a lot of my coaching clients and my therapy clients too, is your systems are gonna change. Don't get married to one. Don't put a crap ton of effort into one because you know that you're gonna not use it, like, for very long. Don't spend a crap ton of money on it. Like, just
Mhm.
plan on it changing. And that was the most freeing thing anyone's ever said to me in my whole life. I was like,
Yeah, 'cause for me, I especially kinda, like, right in the, like, the mid-2000s was,
yeah.
like there was this whole GTD, which stands for Getting Things Done,
Mm,
and so there was a book called Getting Things Done by I think it's David Allen,
mm,
but there was this, like, this whole GTD movement in the kind of the 2000s where people were coming up with all these, like, elaborate systems for using the Getting Things Done method, and I was, like, really into it, and then it just never worked for me,
yeah,
and so I would spend, like, a weekend building this perfect elaborate system, and I would like, "Oh, and then if this happens, I've got this part of the system that's gonna account for that, and then I have this over here." And I'd build this, I'm probably getting, like, the dopamine of, "This is so exciting building this new thing, it's gonna be amazing." And then I'd use it for 2 days maybe, and then never touch it ever again.
I'm seriously gonna fall off my chair. The only reason I'm laughing so hard is because that's so resonating. And I still do it sometimes where I'm like,
Oh, I still
okay,
do it too, I still do it too.
I legitimately I was so excited. I let myself go to Barnes& and Noble, which I rarely do, because a trip to Barnes& and Noble for me always means I drop at least $150. Like, I should not go there unsupervised. It's just the truth. But
Oh, real quick, just jumping in. Same, and there is right now a Barnes& and Noble is being built in my city,
oh
which we
no.
haven't had a bookstore here in years.
Oh no.
I'm so excited, and I'm gonna spend so much money there.
Well, you might as well get their little club thing or whatever to get the discount.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I literally went to Barnes& and Noble. I was like, "I need, like, one that isn't dated. I want one that has 3-ring binder," but this one didn't have the 3-ring binder, or not 3-ring, but a ring binder. And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh," because I like the ring binders because it makes a nice noise. And so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
noise is very pleasing, almost like you're checking it off a list, like it's a little dopamine boost for me, like turning like I've got one here, which you're not gonna be able to hear because on Zoom, but, at any rate, so I was all excited, but then this one wasn't 3-ringed, but I liked everything. Used it twice. It was
Yep,
$30.
yep.
I actually on this one, I hadn't read your book in a while, but I literally thought of you. I was like, "Jesse says it's okay."
Yeah, I call it planning for the pivot, where just like knowing that that is going to happen. And sometimes, especially if I have a big project coming up, like a big project that I want to work on, sometimes I will totally embrace. I'm going to do a brand new productivity system for this. Maybe I'm buying a cool journal for it, something like that. because there's something about that novelty, that dopamine that is
Yeah.
going to help me do the project.
Yeah.
But, but don't build the system thinking it's going to work for the next 6 years, which is what
Correct.
I always think is, oh, this is so good. It's going to work forever. It's no, no, no. Just use it when it works. And then when it stops working, when you get to like day 6 and you're like, oh, I stopped using that thing, I guess that means it's time to move on, and that's fine, and that is okay. It doesn't mean, oh, now it's time for me to feel bad and shame that I'm not using this system. It's no, no, no. That system was always going to stop one day, and sooner rather than later, most likely. And so it's just about kind of embracing, hey, my brain loves novelty, and things can't be novel forever. That's the whole idea. Like novel has to be new, and so you kind of like try to make it interesting enough that it can be useful for a time and then just pivot to something else. And so what that often means is don't try to build a giant system. Do just enough to be able to do your project. And then if it sticks, then you can start to add stuff to it later if you want to make it more elaborate or something like that. But most of the time the novelty will wear off and then it's just time just find something new. Go buy another notebook or something fresh for
Correct.
the next project.
There's never a shortage of options either. Well, and you know what you're actually talking about here, and in a lot of your book, it's like the subtext that's not written. And this is something that I talk about a lot too, which is really a game changer for ADHD, is radical acceptance. Like
Mm,
radically accepting that this is how your brain is on ADHD at whatever phase of life you're in, whether you're undiagnosed guy or girl, or you're a woman in perimenopause, or you're a child, whatever. It's, oh, okay, this is just where my ADHD is at. And shaming myself isn't terribly effective. I understand why a part of me may want to do that to try and keep me on track because it learned to do
mhm,
that when I was younger so I wouldn't get in trouble. But thank you. And I've got this now to the shaming part, right? And instead being
mhm.
like, this is how my ADHD brain is. It's not like a character flaw or there's no moral judgment necessary because you had to stink and switch planners. Or, it's just how our brain, or you needed some scaffolding to get stuff done, or you need a gazillion alarms on your phone to remember that Jesse J. Anderson is going to be on your podcast today. Um, Seriously, obnoxious, dude. But but it's just right. It's like both of us are in this place, and I'm guessing you see this too with the advocacy you do. The people that seem to be navigating it well, or one thing at least that really helps, is that radical acceptance piece.
Yeah, totally. I think that is a really great kind of label to put on that radical acceptance because that really so much of the kind of advocacy stuff where I do and a lot of stuff in the book is really just about not feeling bad when what you think is going to work doesn't work.
Yeah,
Because that is so much of what is the problem where we think, oh, I should be able to do this. Or if I cared, then I would be able to do this. And just feeling all this like shame and guilt for my brain not working the way that others works or the way that others are telling me that my brain should work. It's like I had to learn how to this is how my brain works and I just need to accept that and roll with it and work with it and not feel bad that my brain is different than other people's. It's the whole
yeah,
like metaphor of judging different animals on how they can climb a tree and the fish can't
right.
climb the tree bad or the fish can't climb the tree very well, but that doesn't mean it's bad at being a fish. Like it needs to radically accept what it is good at and what it's not. And that's kind of where I am. There's certain things like doing timesheets. I don't feel bad about being terrible at timesheets anymore. I just don't take jobs where I have to do timesheets because I know that that is not going to work for me. That's something I kind of like. I've had probably like over, I don't know, 35 jobs or something, especially in my 20s. I jumped around a lot. And a lot of that was learning what am I good at and what am I bad at, or what is not compatible with the way my brain works. And like timesheets, expense reports, those are things that are like, those are just aren't compatible for me. And so I need to not take on those sort of jobs or find some radical way that is compatible with me to make it work. And maybe that's hiring somebody to do it. Maybe that's, advocating for accommodations of someone to help with that or something like that. But just like feeling bad about not being able to do it because other people can do it, it just is not helpful. It's not productive at all.
Yeah. So I have something I want to say about that, but first I need to have an ADHD train track moment. I legit have nightmares. So I was a group fitness instructor on the side of all of my social work gigs that I had because I had many, to try and find one that was a fit also. Um,
Right.
but like on the side, and we would have to punch in and use a time card. I have nightmares that I forget to punch in constantly.
Oh
So
my
it's so
gosh.
funny that you're talking about this because this recurring nightmare I have about not remembering to punch in and then not getting paid. And
Right, right. Oh man, yeah, I think that's like another example, the ADHD tax, where there's just because we live in a society that's very neurotypical focused, there's a lot of things that's just becomes a tax on us. Like a lot of late
totally.
fees is a big one. And yeah, there's a lot of times where I've gotten some sort of thing where, hey, all you have to do is fill out this little thing to get, or like expense reports. That's what it is. That's what I was thinking. All I have to do is fill out this paperwork and then send a thing, and then they'll send me a check for like $100, and I end up just never doing it and never getting that check because the paperwork becomes is just that barrier that I can't get past. And so that's just like another one of those ADHD taxes where society makes it hard for me to function. And
Yeah.
so it costs me money.
Yeah, it's true. I have to pay someone to do my billing because I hate for my other business, I hate calling insurance companies, which first of all is a whole rigmarole, which I cannot unpack
Oh
here because
man.
otherwise it's gonna feel like you're giving me therapy. But let's just say something that should take 5 minutes is like a 5 hour ordeal dealing with them. So, but like, I could not get myself to do it. So I was just like, F it. I'd rather lose the $150 on that session than try and spend all this time getting myself to do it. And it's the ADHD tax. But now I have to tell you before I go back to that thing, I wrote it down what I want to go back to. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. And some of the people who watch, I paid the ADHD tax in the worst way. Last year, I was in the airport at my gate
Mm.
in a hyper focus, and it was Southwest Airlines. So, they call your boarding group like a gazillion
Oh
times.
no.
They call your name. You see where this is going? They call your name. Jennifer Baumgartner Barnes, are you here? I was in a hyper focus. About 45 minutes after my flight, I went, oh my gosh, my flight must have been delayed. I go up to the desk. I was like, hey, when did that flight to Minneapolis get delayed to? And they're like, this flight number? I was like, yeah. They're like, honey, that one left 45 minutes ago. And I was like,
Oh man.
and here's the thing, it was Southwest, so I didn't have to pay much to switch my flight, just the difference.
Mhm.
But I had to pay for transportation to the hotel. I had to pay for a hotel because they couldn't get me out because that was the last flight out.
Right.
Transportation to the hotel. That they did have a shuttle to get back the next morning, but I had to pay for food for that time, an extra day of
Mhm.
parking back where my car was in Minneapolis. And so it was like a $250 hyper focus ADHD tax.
Hopefully you got something really valuable done in that 45 minutes.
A lot done, but I don't know that it was worth I
Right,
think more
yeah.
than anything, when I ever share that video, because I made a little video on it, because I was like, I might as well. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, that's content, baby.
right, it's content, and I can be pissed or I can laugh about it, and
Yeah,
there's nothing I can do about it, so I might as well laugh about it. Like,
totally,
I mean,
totally.
you get that sick feeling of, oh my God, but then I mean,
Mhm.
okay, sorry, I just totally spit. But anyway, I thank goodness you're on video. But you can be like, okay, I'm pissed and sulk about it, or it's just like, all right, this crazy ADHD thing happened, and again, that's that radical acceptance, right?
Yeah, I think that's why so many people with ADHD, I feel like we have, as a whole, really great sense of humor, and I think part of it is just, like, so many things go wrong, we just have to laugh about it. We just have to kind of accept and roll with it, and, it's the whole idea of comedy is tragedy plus time, and so we've got all these little mini tragedies. I've missed flights before too, and it's hilarious to look back at it. Like, I actually missed a flight. It was the very first time I got booked to do a speaking gig. It was for a tech conference,
Oh
and
no.
I
Oh
live in
no.
Washington. I live in Washington State, and the talk was at a conference in Florida, so it's like all the way across the country.
Oh
And I
no.
missed my flight, and they were able to move me to another flight, but not to the same airport. So they flew me to Georgia, and then I got in a rental car and I drove 5 hours down the coast to get to where I was supposed to speak in Florida. And I got there no time, excuse me, no time to sleep. I got there like just in time to run to my hotel room, change, and then run to where, because I was of course, the very first talk happening at
No.
this conference. And so I just barely made it, but it was the most, I was like, of course, I'd never missed a flight before, but the first time I have a speaking gig, I'm gonna miss that talk. It was, yeah, ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. Of course, that's how it's gonna happen. It's so true.
Mhm,
Well, it's like you said, we have good senses of humor because it's either that or you're depressed and, like, hate
mhm,
yourself. So,
mhm.
it's like, "All
So,
right, well,
gotta laugh about it, gotta laugh
I
about
mean,
it.
kinda, yeah, you know?" But I wanted okay, so see, I stuck a pin in it. I'm good at circling back when I write it down. Well, you know what I
Nice.
wanna say too, you were talking about, doing all these different jobs, and that's and to find something that fit. And we have that in common. I switched jobs every 2 years when I first entered this field, and even when I was an actuary, I worked for the same company all 4 years, but I switched jobs halfway through. Like, I went
Mm,
from
mhm.
individual annuity to group annuity, which doesn't sound different to anyone, except an actuary. But at
Right.
any rate, that is such a common thing that we switch jobs to find who we are, and it's almost like the switching planners.
Yeah, 100%. Because I feel like when I first started at a new job, I'm amazing. I'm employee of the month for those first couple of months. Like I am crushing it. It's the whole honeymoon period, and I'm learning all the new stuff and I'm having fun. But then what happens with a lot of jobs, you get to the point where, oh, now I'm bored and there's nothing new or interesting happening, which is why a lot of people with ADHD end up thriving in jobs like medical, like EMTs and stuff like that, where there's a lot of change happening, or like entertainment, especially anything that's live. That's another place where people with ADHD are drawn. So like I've, accounts on social media, and I see that a lot of reporters and like people that do news follow me because they have ADHD, and they're kind of drawn to that. It's always breaking news. There's always something fresh and new and interesting happening that they have to kind of figure out live. And that's how I eventually kind of found a career doing software development. And part of that is that in doing software development, you're always solving new problems. You're getting fresh stuff to do all the time. So it never feels just like boring, at least the kind of work that I was doing. I was just like always getting to find new stuff. And so because of that, while I jumped around in my 20s, I was all over the place with jobs. My first like really big, great software development job, I worked there for 9 years. And so I had my average job length was probably like 4 months before that. And then I landed that job and stayed there for 9 months or 9 years. And that part of that was, it was a really great company. And I had a manager for most of it. I had the same manager that was really awesome and things like that. But also, it was just, I was able to find that job where things were changing a lot. I was getting to do new stuff. So that novelty continued to be reintroduced while I was doing that work.
That's awesome. And I love that you found software development to be so engaging. I don't know that this little conversation here is gonna end up being exciting for many. I had the exact opposite experience doing software development because between being an actuary, or actually actuarial analyst, I need to say, and being a social worker, I did I lasted 6 months at doing software development, but here's why. I had one job. I had to figure out how to get a combo box to program our own combo box because now this was cutting edge back in the year like 2000, FYI. Now it's no big deal. But I had to figure out, so we had software that generated itself based on what it was human resource software. So the human resource person could be like, "Well, I want these fields on my form in our company." And so they would just drag and drop the form and then or the elements, and then the form would create, right? Well, the
Right.
combo box that comes with the programming language that I was using, which for people who don't know, when you create software, you write in a certain kind of technical computery language that has some English and some syntax. So that language did not have a combo box that would work the way we needed it to. So my only job for 6 months was to make this combo box that would work. Yeah. I would fall asleep at my desk and there would be drool on my desk. Like legitimately, they always joke about that happening, but like it
Right.
actually happened to me. So I'm so glad that you had a software analyst job that was not meant because it
Yeah,
bored
I
my
do.
socks off.
I do wonder if part of it is, so my background before that job was in design. And so the development I do is what they call front end development, which is more on the design side of stuff. And so
Okay.
I really enjoy the part that works for me is solving problems that users have and like trying to predict like how can I make this page easier and make more sense to the user? So for me, it's always been kind of a fun challenge. But yeah, I mean, with everything, everyone's unique and you kind of have to find what is the thing that excites your brain. And
Right.
that's kind of what's really important to find. Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly what we're talking about. What excites your brain? Well, and actually, maybe if I was doing design instead of only coding, that would have been more fun, right? So again, we're
Yeah.
talking about those admin tasks are boring for our brains, especially if they're repetitive. So,
Yeah.
so
One thing with that, I feel like I know so many people that have been really amazing at their job. I have this friend, she worked in a corporate environment. She was like killing it, doing really good at all this stuff, except for timesheets. She had these timesheets and she would get in so much trouble for these silly like timesheets. And she ended up leaving that job, which is so ridiculous because she was amazing at everything else. And it was just this one thing that was difficult. And it's the sort of thing where you just wonder if that company had just sort of like stepped in and provided some sort of accommodation. Like they could have paid some intern just to do that for her or something because she was like high powered, like doing all this like really great work. And they lost her completely as an employee because of this like silly little task that happened to be something that, was difficult for her to get done. And I feel like I hear that sort of story a lot where someone's, oh, I was really great at 90%, but this one 10%, like they wouldn't budge on and it just wasn't compatible with me. And so I left.
yeah, which is such a bummer because the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, the creativity that we bring as ADHDers, like, and the innovation we bring because of how our brains do not think the same way that every other brain in their company will think. Even our ADHD brains don't think the same as each other. They're just so wild. We have commonalities, but there's ways that we can have wildly different ideas because of how our
Totally.
brains are so creative and they take in our environments and just synthesize them in different ways than maybe anyone else would see it. It's interesting to me and sad that companies don't see that that benefit is worth way more than the extra 5 minutes a week it would take someone else to do your damn timesheet.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it kind of reminds me of I feel like every once in a while you'll see some like new marketing campaign will come out and then people will be like, well, clearly no women are on their marketing team because any woman would have pointed out this issue with it or something like that. And that's the same sort of thing I think with having neurodivergent thinkers on your team. We're like adding that diverse perspective lets you see there's that, like you said, innovation and just having there's so many things that you're not seeing when you kind of like you by having some of those silly things like timesheets, you're blocking out a lot of people that could be adding value, and
yeah.
so you're just getting kind of like homogenized, and is no good.
Right, it isn't, and so then what comes to my mind, because my background is social work, so I'm all about social justice, is like, 1, yes, how do we help people ask for the scaffolding that they need? But 2, how do we as people who work with people like us with ADHD and advocates for ADHD, how do we then move the needle in the system? Because this is
Mm,
clearly this is a systemic issue. This isn't we're broken, this is the system is broken because some of the things that are required. I mean, it's like they didn't have an elevator for people in a wheelchair or a ramp, right? Well,
right.
asking people with ADHD, and I'm not sure autism, I think they can have trouble with admin tasks too. There's a lot of overlap, but I'd have to look at my little chart to make sure I'm not misspeaking. Whatever it is, this is a way that you're accommodating just a natural way of being, and it wouldn't take that much.
Yeah, and not only that, there's so many of those like accommodation methods or whatever that are actually beneficial for everyone. There's a great example of I forget what you call it, like a curb, like putting the little dip in the curb so that a wheelchair can get onto the sidewalk. Okay, those like curved sidewalks, or I can't
Yeah,
remember the name of it,
I know what you're
but
talking about.
yeah, but that's beneficial for everybody. Once you do that, you're like, "Oh, actually, that's just really easy for people to walk up onto the sidewalk from the road because there's a nice little dip right there." And it's really helpful if I'm like moving something and then now I'm like I got like a cart I'm trying to push on there. It just makes it actually is something that wouldn't have probably been invented if it weren't for coming up with wheelchair access. But now that it
Yeah.
has, that actually benefits everybody. And there's so many things like that where
Yeah.
by helping out the diverse individuals and diverse needs, it actually becomes a benefit to everybody involved.
It's so true. I'm thinking like moms with strollers, my dad with his
Oh,
walker,
strollers, yeah,
like,
yeah.
not just moms with strollers. I know you're a good dad. I know you walk your kid in strollers. I
Yeah, my kids are just a little bit older, so I hadn't even thought of the strollers, but yeah,
yeah,
that's a great example. Or like
yeah.
walkers, yeah, bicycle, like there's a whole lot that it just sort of helps
People with hip or
so many
knee
people.
surgery.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's just one thing, right? So it's like,
Totally.
yeah, it's so true. And also I kind of think timesheets are dumb, but anyway, that's a whole
Right.
nother,
There's that too.
especially when you're at the salaried level. Like, really, people?
Totally. Yeah. It's just like, what do you, I agree. Like it makes sense more, yeah, for like hourly, but when salary, I remember I worked at a job that was a salary job and they at some point had a management change and the new manager came in and started doing time tracking. And I left a week later. I was like, this is not going to work for me. I just know I'm going to end up getting fired anyway because I'm just going to end up not doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna exit right now.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I love that. Well, I think, there's some of us out there, and certainly like you and Jessica McCabe and Danny Donovan, all of you have a bit bigger channels than me, but I'm working on it. And maybe if all of us are like also not only talking to how we can support people, but also once in a while tossing in something about the systemic stuff, maybe we can move the needle on some of this because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Jessica McCabe actually just gave a talk about this. I think was it like a month ago at Neurodiversion, which is an awesome new conference. This was the first year, but it's gonna be amazing next year. So definitely go to Neurodiversion if you can. But she gave a talk very specifically about this idea. So I know that's something that's a big passion of hers right now. And I will just say, like you said, people that are big in this space or whatever, I remember when I was nobody too, and I was just like, I was a fan of Danny Donovan and Jessica McCabe and all that. They do such amazing content. And now I'm great friends with both of them, which is
Yeah.
so cool. And so I think there's so much positivity and just like g- general good vibes among the community
Yeah.
that yeah, I think it's all about kind of like connecting and getting to know people and helping each other out. And it's just
Yeah.
such a very positive environment. And so I
Yeah.
love kind of being part of this like ADHD creator community, whatever it is online. And yeah, so I think it's amazing. So you'll
Thanks.
have to be at Neurodiversion next year and
I would
then
love
hang out and it'll
to
be
do
amazing.
that. That would be so cool. Is it a virtual event or is it an in-person event?
It's an in-person
Where is
event.
it usually?
Well, the first year they did, it was in Austin.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know if it's going to be in the same. I
Boo.
think they're talking about a few locations. Austin is one of the possibilities. But yeah, there's something too about just being in person at an event like that that is just it's just amazing. So the first like in-person ADHD event I went to was like probably 3 years ago. There was like an international ADHD conference. And I got to meet like some of the people that I knew online that I had talked with on like Instagram or something.
Uh-huh.
But being like seeing them in person, now we're like this like great friend group that chat all the time online. There's something just about that kind of person face-to-face meeting
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
changes kind of a friendship and a relationship in like a really awesome way.
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, any sort of like in-person event you can go to where with like fellow ADHD people is amazing.
The
So
energy there has got to be phenomenal.
yeah, that's the other thing. You feel like you can just be yourself because
Yeah.
everyone there has ADHD. You don't have to apologize for everything. Like
Yeah.
really quickly, my favorite story. Another friend of mine, Meredith Carter. She goes by Hummingbird ADHD.
I think I follow her on Insta.
Okay, yeah, yeah, she's awesome. But one of the things that happened the first night at this conference a few years ago, some of us brought like business cards, so we were like sharing like contact cards and stuff like that, and she had forgotten to bring any. Um, and somebody else told her, "Hey, there's actually a Kinko's inside of this hotel. I printed mine this morning. You could go there and get some printed." And so she went to go do that, and then she came back to the group later on, and she's like, "Guys, look what happened." And she held up her business card, filled the entire an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It was like full size, like the entire page, these giant like business cards. And it was like it was such a great moment because we all related. It was like any one of us could have done this same exact thing. It's such like an ADHD thing to happen. And it was like this really great, like, camaraderie kind of moment of us just like laughing together and no one laughing at her, like all
No,
laughing
like
because we're
hugging
like,
her.
this 100% would have been me if I was the one to go do that thing. And
Uh-huh.
it was amazing. So there's something about just being able to not have to apologize for like interrupting people or like things that people with ADHD just kind of naturally do. It was just like accepted and it was a pretty awesome moment. So
I
yeah.
love that. Thanks for sharing. I'll have to definitely keep an eye on it. I actually had Danny Donovan on my podcast. Oh my gosh, my podcast wasn't that old yet. This is actually our 99th episode.
Woo, nice,
So we're
nice.
getting there. We're getting there. But yeah, I had her on early on and she was so fun, so
Oh,
smart,
she's the
so
best. I
great.
love Danny. So she's so funny.
Although I have to have her back on because when I did that, I was still so in awe of her book and I was basically fawning over how amazing her book was the entire almost kind of embarrassing. It was still a good
Love that.
conversation, and it just really did a good job of showing what her book is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, she's got the anti-planner, how to get shit done without when you don't feel like it. So that's another really good option.
Yeah,
But
fantastic book. Yeah, it's awesome.
fantastic. And it wasn't written for ADHD, but might as well have been. But even if you don't have ADHD, you'd benefit from it. But Jesse, this has been phenomenal having you on the show. I'm actually kind of sad. I'm like, I could sit and talk to you for a long time, dude. Like, I actually hope to meet you if we both end up at the neurodivergent concert. I think that would be
Yeah, definitely.
fun. I'm not shy. I just walk up to people, and if you don't want to talk to me, you just have to tell me because I don't understand social cues. So
Awesome. Well, hopefully we make that happen. That would be awesome.
I know it'd be
Yeah,
super
this has been
awesome.
amazing.
It'd be super awesome. So I just want everyone to know Jesse has this awesome book called Extra Focus, and it's phenomenal. We taught he shared about a lot of the strategies from it today. Highly recommend you get this book. Is there a way to get it so it's not from Amazon so you get a bigger cut, or is Amazon the only way?
Yeah, so you can get it actually anywhere. So I do have a website, extrafocusbook.com, and
Okay,
that
great.
has links. So you can buy it direct from me, which is the best way to do it. You can also, there's bookshop.org, which helps you find, like, buy from local bookstores, which is cool. And you can actually go anywhere and request it too. So they, even if they don't have it there, it's in the system or whatever. So pretty much any bookshop should be able to get it on order.
Awesome.
Yeah, but extrafocusbook.com is where to get all the links for any of that stuff.
Okay, awesome. Because I want to make sure I don't like to support that. And I'm a big fan of bookshot.org. In fact, I have a fourth Friday, like dive in Friday, where I talk about what I'm reading, watching, and listening to. Which probably your little thing on your website that's toxic productivity will probably be the thing that I watched
Oh,
on
nice.
my May one. But at any rate, I always put a link to the book, and I definitely never. I only ever use bookshop.org for my link because it's helps support independent bookstore owners. And then I don't know if the author gets a bigger cut, but when you get it on Amazon, I think someone told me I'm not to protect the innocent. I won't say who. But that they take like a 90% cut or something crazy like that. So
So it does just a little behind the scenes on it. It depends on if you have a publisher or not. So I
mm,
specifically decided to self-publish for a few reasons. One, like I said, I have a design background and I was like, I need to have full control over the cover because if the cover is something I don't like, then I'm going to be like, I can't promote it because I'm embarrassed of it. And
same.
so that was one reason. And another is I knew I wanted it to be short. Like you said, it's a fast read and I didn't want a publisher to try and make me force it into 300 pages. So instead, I think it's like 140, so that
Yeah.
it's a really fast read and really focused on just getting you what's going to be helpful.
Yeah. It's
But
super well
because
done.
thank you, the benefit of that, as far as like Amazon or anywhere else is concerned, is I get a much larger cut of the royalties. So I don't know how much that percentage changes if you're going through a publisher, but I do know, like for me, I probably get about the same no matter where you get it.
Oh,
So
that's good to know.
luckily, I don't have to feel like I have to push people a certain way. It's whatever is most
Great.
convenient for you.
Okay, great.
And Amazon's kind of like the behemoth, but so I totally get that people are trying. Unfortunately, it's like you can't just not have your book on Amazon if you want to have a book that can sell.
Yeah.
But I totally love that people are like want alternatives.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Yeah.
bookshop.org is a great place or buy direct from me at
Yeah.
extrafocusbook.com.
Thank you for sharing. I just like to find that out because the people in my community tend to be very fiscally responsible and
Totally.
and social justice minded, and so very intentional about people getting paid for their work and getting paid well for their work. And so I just thank you for sharing that. I just like to make sure that we can honor, because you did really amazing work here, and it's important to honor. So if people wanted to stay in touch with you, Jesse, if they want to be able to know what's going on with Jesse J. Anderson, which the J is important, people, but if they want to know what's going on with Jesse J. Anderson, how might they find out?
Yeah, so I'm on pretty much all the social media as ADHD Jesse, and that's Jesse.
Okay.
But probably the best place, I have a weekly newsletter also called Extra Focus, like the book, so extrafocus.com. And every week I'm writing about ADHD, sharing strategies, tips, stories, all that sort of stuff. And that's probably the best way to see the stuff I got coming out. I've got some really exciting things I'm working on that are hopefully coming out soon. So extrafocus.com, best place to do it. And if you sign up there, you get a free like mini ADHD strategy guide. So that's a good bonus
That's
for you too.
neato. I might have gotten that a long time ago when I signed up, because I know I get your newsletter. And there was a really cool interview you did with someone who's an ADHD entrepreneur, woman entrepreneur, which is what my primary audience was before I brought into more professional women like 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah,
like I
totally
read that
relevant. No
email and I was
sky.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, there's lots of cool stuff in his newsletter, and it's not garbage, and it's very ADHD friendly. For those of you who are like, oh, I get a million emails, this one is worth it. So,
Awesome.
yeah, cool. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It is such an honor to have you here, Jesse. And I truly appreciate you being willing to come on. I really am grateful for it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been awesome. I loved it.
Yay, super fun, super fun. So, all right. So, thanks everyone for being here. If you're not following the Self Loved ADHD Woman Way podcast, make sure you hit that follow button or subscribe if you're getting it on YouTube. And if you like this episode, like it, share it. Let's get this information out there so we can help more ADHD people. Thanks again. Take care.